time. Extra, luxurious time. Who has it? Not I, said the little red hen. Today, I'm going to be sharing my tips on sewing fast, but sewing successfully, because sewing success is what it's all about. Let's go. I was bereft just a few months back when I realized I didn't bring any wax print in large amounts with me to the Sunset Studio. And then yesterday, as I was going through our roller bags preparing to pack again, I realized these two beauties were just sitting tucked away in one of the zippered compartments of our many bags and roller totes and boxes and things. So obviously, I need to sew one of these up before we head back to New York, because if you packed it and you didn't use it, then you failed, and I don't like to fail. This is what I like to call slam sewing, and in all my years of slam sewing, I've come up with some real good tips on how to have a quick, successful project that you're going to end up loving. My number one and most important tip is to go with what you know. Sew what you know. Okay? Don't be trying out any brand new pattern if you're slam sewing and need to get something done quickly, because that could end in heartache. It could end beautifully, but you want to be successful here, right? Let's not roll the dice. I'm going to be going with Vogue Patterns 1898. You saw this pattern before in my closet video. Yes, this is supposed to be a dress, but I made it as a crop top. I wanted to toile just the top of this pattern because I wasn't sure if I was gonna like the entire look of it, and I ended up loving it as a crop top, as you can see. Going with a pattern that you've already had like a date with, an experience with, is going to save you time when you wanna sew faster. It eliminates the stranger danger, the unknowable from the pattern, because you've already been through it. It's what we call a TNT pattern. That is so speak for tried and true, okay? Go with the TNT pattern to sew faster and sew successfully. You also want to choose a pattern with minimal pieces. Now, this pattern, if we open her up, she has 11 pieces. That's the French version. We don't need that. Although, parlez-vous français? Oui. This pattern actually has 11 pieces. That is not conducive to sewing faster. You want to limit those pattern pieces. Now, because I'm only making the top portion of this dress, I'm actually only going to need, according to the instructions, 7 pieces. But I'm gonna whittle that down even more. I'm not gonna do that sleeve band. I'm not gonna do that collar. So I only need 4 pieces, 4 pattern pieces to make this quick sew, and that's gonna make my sewing life easier and faster. It's all about fast today. Playing it fast but not loose, We playing it fast and tight, okay? We need to keep our sewing tight. My next tip for you is to live in the moment. Live in the body that you are in at this very moment. You need to take your digits before every sew. I don't care if you just measured yourself yesterday and you about to sew today. Take those digits again before you start your sew, preferably not after like a large meal, like biscuits and bacon, like I just devoured. But also not after no meal, because you wanna live in your garment. You wanna eat them biscuits and bacon. You wanna enjoy your life. I have taken my measurements, and indeed, I'm safe to go with this pattern. And I know this because I'm gonna look at the finished garment measurements on my pattern. If you saw my Inside the Envelope video, you will know that there's an Easter egg waiting for you inside these pattern envelopes. The outside of the envelope has your recommended bust, waist, hip sizes. The inside of the envelope on the actual pattern paper has a little target that is actually going to tell you the finished garment measurements. Right here is where I'm going to choose my pattern size from. I've cut a size 12 here, which means it's a 36.5-inch bust. That's good for me right now. If you take your digits and you find that the moment has passed for you from when you last made your TNT pattern, that moment might come back again, but now is not the moment for you to use that specific pattern. If your digits conflict and you don't have it already traced out in the proper size, you got to move on to another pattern. You got to move on and decide fate is telling you this fabric wants to be something different if you want to slam sew it. Well, I've already mentioned that you need to love yourself, love your body, love your digits. Why don't you write some love notes to yourself? A lot of sewing fast is doing the prep work beforehand. I've made this pattern before, and when I went through this pattern, I made notes to myself on what I did along the way. I graded seams here, which the instructions don't tell you to do. I clipped curves and pressed them to the back. I made notes of which steps I omitted, the collar, to make it easier on myself. These are all notes, little breadcrumbs that I left for myself in case I got done with the pattern and absolutely loved it and wanted to make it again and make it exactly as I had made it before. Or if in the middle of sewing it, I walked off to like pet the cat, make dinner, do any number of the many jobs that I do to, stay afloat, and didn't come back to actually sew this for, say, another couple of weeks, at which point I would have completely forgotten where I was in the process and what I was doing and what planet I was existing on. That's why you should write love notes to yourself. Now that I want to do this very quick slam sew, I've got a complete roadmap here that I know works because I took notes. Do you all know Kenneth King? If y'all don't know Kenneth King, you gotta look you up. Look you up some Kenneth King. He is a sewing guru. His advice was, take notes as if you expect to have amnesia at any moment. I think that's how he said it. I might be misremembering that, which is ironic. Another tip that I've picked up from a lot of professional pattern makers, professional costume shop workers is trace your pattern onto sturdier paper. This is a sturdier craft paper. I also like to use contractor's paper when I really, really love a pattern and I know I'm going to use it over and over again. This sturdy paper, if you place it on your fabric, you can actually just trace around it and then cut the pattern out, because every time you cut a pattern out, laying that tissue paper down on the fabric, you're losing a little bit of that pattern, no matter how careful you are, somewhere along the way. If you want to sew faster and you know you love the pattern, trace it onto heavyweight paper. This pattern, I've made it here and here and here and here and here and here. Spoiler alert, this pattern is going to be one of the little doodahs that is coming your way very soon. What I really like to do for my sewing life and for my life in general is create the mise en scène. I am blessed with a mother and with a mother-in-law who both love to have beauty everywhere you look. There's a piece of beauty everywhere you look. And that's how I like my sewing life to go. In every little corner of my sewing studio here and in New York and on the road, wherever I go, I do whatever I can to create a mise en scène. That's what I like to do when I'm starting a project. This little Dollar General plate, little cake plate, holds all my sewing supplies for whatever I'm about to embark on. I'm going to be using this glorious piece of fabric right here. So I've got my complementary thread. I've got my seam ripper, because seam rippers love your seam ripper, y'all. Your seam ripper is your best friend. Okay, I've got my little thread snips. I've got my Frixion pen. I've got the proper needles for the project. Get all your tools beforehand. Make sure you've got everything you need for the project. Say this pattern calls for interfacing. Make sure you've got some on hand. Say it calls for a zipper. Make sure you've got that on hand. Because if you're slam sewing and it's all going along beautifully and then you get to the last step and you don't have the proper closure, you're gonna be sad, okay? That means pick a different pattern. My next tip is a doozy. Are you ready for this one? Are you ready? Be wasteful. That's right. I know that as a society, as a sewing society, we are trying to be less wasteful, and I applaud us for that in general. But listen, if you create a zero waste garment with 4 yards of fabric and 2 seams, and you go out in a potato sack and like wear it for a week, feeling good about your life, and then donate it to the Goodwill, you're not actually being less wasteful because you just wasted all that fabric. Okay? I mean, if you like that kind of thing, you like that look and you rock that look, and it's a look that you like keep in your closet for years to come, then, you know, more power to you. You do you rock, you're doing wonderfully, you get an A, you get an A+. But for me, if I'm gonna sew 4 yards of fabric with 2 shoulder seams and 0 remnants, 0 scraps, I'm not gonna feel better about my life, because in the end, that's getting donated. I'm gonna get even hotter with this take, okay? If I've got a little bodice piece and I need the print that I'm working with to lay specifically in a place on the pattern, I will put that bodice piece smack dab in the center of that fabric. I will do it. I will do it. I will not conserve, because listen, I want to show you something. She's pretty. She's a pretty dress, right? She's a pretty dress. I don't actually need the mic for this part. However, she was not pretty the first time I cut the bodice, or the second time I cut the bodice. Nay, even the third time I cut the bodice. Was there a fourth time? There might have been. However many times I had to cut this bodice, I cut it in order to get it to play with my eye happily. Because if you finish the dress or the shirt or the pants or the jacket and there's headlights on your headlights, and that's not the look that you're going for, that's wasteful, because you're not going to wear that garment. Don't worry so much about conserving fabric if it's at the risk of creating a garment that you're not going to love. I've talked a lot about fabric in this here video. Here's my biggest tip for slam sewing when choosing your fabric. Be judicious about it. There are several kinds of prints that you can choose from. If you're a print lover like me, you can choose a organic print. You can choose a directional print like a plaid or say monkeys with their heads up. That's a directional print. You can choose a repeating print. If you're slam sewing, I would steer clear of directional and repeating prints, especially if the repeating print is large and if the directional print is feisty, like this one. This guy right here is going to cause me grief if I try to sew it quickly. I need to get down on the floor with this baby and cozy up to it and have a little me time with it and place my pattern all sorts of places all over it to find out exactly where I want the print to lie. This kind of sewing takes time. Here are some examples of prints that took a long time to cut. And in my opinion, paid off in the end. I love all of these garments. I had a lot of remnants from these garments. I save them. I use them. I just used one in my little purse. Where my little purse at? I just used one in my little purse. There she is. Remnant. Good reason to actually cut the dress, the garment, the way you want to cut it, because there's always a use for remnants. And if you want to make this, you can check out my video right here. I'll link all of these things below in the description box. Next tip. Giving yourself the flexibility to cut freely and the amount of yardage that you need in order to be flexible. For instance, wax print comes in 6-yard cuts. I normally don't buy fabric in anything less than a 3-yard cut, because who knows what I'm going to want to do with it? Who knows where I want the print to fall? Those things are going to help you sew faster. I love rolling around on the floor with my fabric. That's a wonderful use of time. But when I don't have a lot of time, This is the kind of print that I go for. This is an organic print. It doesn't have a heavy repeat, and the motifs are haphazard and cacophonous, right? Look at that. Oh my goodness. And so no matter pretty much where I put my pattern pieces on this print, I'm going to be safe. I'm not going to have to worry about giving headlights to my hooters or any other number of things that would make people look twice on the street. All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed these tips and tricks on sewing fast and sewing successfully. More importantly, I hope it helps you to get into your own slam sewing, maybe today, maybe this evening, maybe when everyone's gone to sleep. The elves will begin to work. Don't forget to check out my Instagram right down there for the finished product of what I'm about to slam sew. Peace out, y'all. Emphasis on peace. Just gonna start laying this out because oh my God.